So the Dhamma for today is called the Abhinha Paccavekkhana Dhamma. The topics for frequent reflection. Paccavekkhana, reflection in Buddhism is an important part of our practice that's probably not emphasized as much as it deserves. Reflection isn't precisely meditation practice, but it's something that accompanies meditation practice, and you could say is an essential part of one's spiritual development. So with meditation practice, we're focusing on an individual object, applying concentration to an experience or a construct, depending on whether it's samatha meditation or vipassana meditation. But reflection is more cerebral than that. It's more intellectual, more conceptual, and much less focused or concentrated. It's more about adjusting one's views and one's perspective and evoking the qualities that will support us in the practice of the Buddha's teaching. So sometimes it's a precursor to practice. For example, there's the reflection that leads people to ordain as monastics. Yanuna hang babaji sami. Well, then in that case, I might as well ordain. Someone might think this based on reflecting on their situation. Reflections can occur during practice to help to solidify and reaffirm your experiences, like where one says, Bahu dukho koyang kayo bahu adinavo. Oh, this body indeed is of much suffering, of much disadvantage. There's a state of one of the stages of knowledge where one comes to see the disadvantages of clinging to the body, that the body is not this wonderful and valuable, useful tool that we think it is. It's in fact in many ways a burden, and so on. And Paccavekkhana is often something that occurs after practice, when you reflect on the results of the practice, which helps build confidence, appreciation, and solidify your determination to continue to go further with the practice. But the Abhinha Paccavekkhana are topics for frequent reflection. So the idea here is that it's not something that has a specific time or place. It's something that is a part of our daily practice. These are topics that increase our confidence, our sense of urgency and the need for practice. They're topics that adjust our views on the practice, that remind us of the right way to practice and the right way to dedicate our lives if we start to slip or fall off the practice. Reflecting in this way, in these ways, is very much associated with wisdom and sort of mundane wisdom that encourages us to practice in the right way. So altogether there are 5. These are the 5 Abhinha Paccavekkhana for everyone. The Buddha said whether you're a monastic or a lay person, male or female, doesn't matter. These are topics of frequent reflection. There's another set that we chant as one of our evening chanting topics. There's 10 of those that are specifically for people who have gone forth, and they're things like reflecting and reminding yourself that you're no longer a lay person, that you rely on other people as through alms food for your sustenance and so on. But that's not what these are. These are much more general and so much more universally applicable and related directly to our practice. There is some overlap, but these are universal topics that everyone should reflect upon. The first is, I will become old. I am subject to old age. Reminding us about the intoxication that comes from clinging or enjoying youth enjoying our state of strength and energy and the sharpness of mind and the power of the body that comes from being young. It's a reminder that we don't have forever to live this life as a young, strong and energetic and vigorous youth, that we are all subject to age and decay. This is one of the topics here that increases our sense of urgency, that indeed we should not waste our time and not let ourselves become negligent in our practice, that we should apply ourselves diligently and undertake the practice with a sense of urgency. Reminder that we're all getting old, that every day is a day less that we have in this life. That our bodies get old, we lose our strength of our arms and our legs, and we take on pains and aches that come from old age and that sort of thing. And as well that our minds become feeble as our memories decline and our faculties become dulled, our eyes and our ears and so on. That we don't have forever, that we can't become intoxicated and lose ourselves in the world of sensuality, because as we age we lose our ability to enjoy it. And these same objects that used to bring us joy now bring us pain. And that we have aches and pains in the body where we used to enjoy and rejoice and play in regards to the body. The second is, I am subject to illness. And of course this is a big one. This is something that we become negligent about quite easily, intoxicated with our health. As long as we are healthy, we plan our lives around this. We plan our lives around being in good health. When we think of our ambitions and our goals and our wants and our dreams, we don't factor in the inevitability of sickness. And so we become intoxicated with the pleasure and the peace that comes from having good health, when of course sickness can come at any time. Anyone who has been sick in any real capacity can attest to how much suffering it is because of our partiality towards pleasure and our aversion towards pain. Of course, these truths and these realities are very much ameliorated through the practice of mindfulness meditation, meaning that they provide us an encouragement to undertake the practice of mindfulness. If you ask yourselves, being subject to old age, being subject to sickness and so on, what can I do to free myself from the potential suffering that will come from these states? And of course mindfulness is the greatest answer. Through the practice of mindfulness, old age no longer becomes something to be afraid of. You no longer have to be young and virile to be at peace and to be happy. You no longer even need perfect health. That even in great sickness, great physical sickness, the most important thing is that we have the freedom from mental illness. And of course mental illness in Buddhism includes greed and anger, delusion, these states of sorrow and depression and anxiety and fear that consume us and allow us to suffer so greatly, especially when our physical aspect is subject to things like sickness. So there's even things from a simple headache to cancer, heart disease, food poisoning is a common one for people living in tropical places. We get mosquito-borne illnesses, there are airborne illnesses, there are illnesses that come from the water, illnesses that come from food, illnesses that come from old age. And so ultimately, illness, sickness is something that comes to everyone, because as you get older, you become subject to the sicknesses of a failing body. And so this is an inevitability to all of us. It's a question we have to ask ourselves. Am I ready? Am I able to face the inevitability of uncertainty that could lead to great suffering and great pain in my life? The third is perhaps a little more blunt, is death. I'm subject to death. That you may be able to escape sickness, you may even be able to escape old age, but it would only be because you could not escape death. And if you die at an early age, you can congratulate yourself on having skipped the old age part, but you can't skip the death part. The death comes to all. And this is a big one in Buddhism. This particularly the Buddha suggested that we should be constantly cognizant of. That we should always be reminded of the fact that no matter what ambitions or goals or plans we might have in this life, they're all circumscribed by death. And any goal we might have that doesn't include the inevitability of death is based on delusion and ignorance and intoxication. We become intoxicated with life, thinking thinking only about life, trying to avoid and not think about death. And people will often say, if you think about death, it's a pessimistic state. It's going to be a state that leads to great suffering. But the people who suffer most from death, even from thinking about death, are those who try to avoid it. Those who become familiar with death and acknowledge and appreciate that it's a natural part of life. As a process of reflection, can slowly free themselves from the fear of death by reflecting on the quality of their mind and their capacity to deal with death, which of course comes through the practice of mindfulness. So reflecting on death is a great way to test your mindfulness, to ask yourself if you're ready, and to acknowledge that you still might have fear of death or clinging to life, clinging to the things that you have while you're alive and so on. And also it's a reminder of the importance of practice. As I've said, when you die, your whole life flashes before your eyes. You remember many things that you may have forgotten. And they can drag you down or pull you up, depending on whether they are good deeds or bad deeds. If your mind is impure, you will cling to the bad things and be dragged down to an unpleasant, a painful rebirth. Whereas if your mind is clear, if your mind is pure, if you're ready for death, or not just ready for death, but if your quality of mind is such that you're ready for anything, that you have a sense of the uncertainty of life and you're not disturbed by the uncertain nature of reality, then even when death comes, you're not disturbed by it, and you don't suffer as a result of the experiences and the reminders that come up at the moment of death. So reflecting on these three is a staple part of Buddhism: old age, sickness, and death. Just remembering that these are a part of life. Life isn't just the good side, even though the good side exists. If you become negligent and intoxicated in pleasure and happy states, then this is how you become completely caught off guard by the so-called negative states, when in fact they need not be negative if you are mindful and objective and see clearly. You can grow old at peace, you can be sick at peace, you can even die at peace if you have mindfulness and cultivate the practices that the Buddha taught. The fourth is that everything that I hold dear, animate or inanimate objects, I will have to be separated from all of those things. It doesn't matter whether they are my possessions. I mean, this is an obvious truth like the others, but again is something that we don't reflect upon and we don't acknowledge the importance and the significance of this truth. Because the common experience with that which is held dear is to suffer when you lose it. That yes, you may enjoy and have happiness when you possess these objects, but you grieve and you mourn and can even be driven to great mental upset and illness as a result of loss. People who lose their children, who lose their loved ones, not even sometimes people who just lose their possessions. And not even lose these things, even the fear of losing these things causes great stress. The worry and the anxiety, the stress that one goes through, trying to protect and to keep the things that they have, whether it's people or possessions, to keep them the way they are, is just so much stress and suffering that we could so easily do without. But people think that it's a natural part of holding something dear to suffer. Even for their whole life, someone might suffer. If they lose someone that was dear to them, a parent who loses a child, or a husband or wife who loses their partner, can deal so much crippling sorrow or sadness that a person might even think is valid and inevitable, and can even cling to the suffering. I know you can see people who cling to the suffering, not wanting to let it go for the reason that they don't have a clear understanding of the nature of suffering and how to truly find happiness, and not realizing that it's unnecessary. And this is the greatness of the Buddha's teaching, that our experiences are inevitable. It is inevitable that we will lose everything. If not in life, then of course in death. But the question is, are we ready for these things? Now, for many people, they might be wagering in a sense that they die before they lose the things they love, in which case they think, well, they won't have to leave them behind, because of course people think when they die that's it. But this can be a big part of the suffering that comes at the moment of death, when one mourns the loss of a loved one, the loss of one's loved ones as one passes away, if one is not at peace with death, not at peace with loss. So reflecting on these things absolutely helps us to mitigate or to lessen our attachment to things, realizing that happiness can't come from things because they're unpredictable, they're undependable, they're not dependable. Not things we can rely upon, even and especially people who are changing and leaving and subject to old age and sickness and death. Not that we can't love or appreciate people, but our attachment to individuals is kind of absurd and unhealthy. There's no reason for us to hold certain people above others, except in terms of perhaps their qualities. To hold dear to family members or loved ones, it not only doesn't make sense, but it absolutely leads to suffering. So the Buddha's teaching is a more free sort of love and kindness and friendliness towards all beings, a sense of wishing well for all, and friendliness and kindness and sort of amity towards all, which of course is free from the stress and suffering. So again, this is the kind of thing that leads us to realize how attached we are, and to see through mindfulness how much stress comes from suffering. Just the reminder that these things are not ours. They're not really ours, and they never really were ours. This is just an idea that we have that is often very much out of line with the nature of reality, as of course it changes and we lose the things that we love. The fifth is that I am the owner of my kamma, the owner of my deeds. I am not only owner, I am bound to my deeds. I have my deeds as my refuge. My deeds, I am the heir to my deeds. Whatever deeds I do, whether they are evil or good, I will inherit the results of those deeds. So the saying goes that these are our true possessions. What we truly possess are the results of our deeds, the results of our qualities of mind, both in how they change the world around us and in how they change our minds. One example, as I mentioned, is at the moment of death. We inherit all of the deeds that we performed in this life, and they add up to some extent and have a great impact on the moment of death and the resulting rebirth. Not only that, but of course they affect us in this life, that we're constantly being being brought face to face with the results of our actions, the consequences of our actions, whether that be external consequences, or even in the case where external consequences are avoided through the power of other deeds that we've done, or through the power of our situation, our circumstance. A rich person might be able to escape the external consequences of their deeds. Someone who is powerful, someone who has good friends, or even someone who has done good things in the past. If they have good qualities or have done good deeds in the past, even their evil deeds will not in the beginning bear great fruit. And the same goes with good people. If someone has in the past had a sketchy or unwholesome activities in the past, if they have a lot of bad karma, it will catch up with them before any new good deeds that they perform. Nonetheless, we're still constantly able to see the results of both our good and bad deeds. A person who does evil cannot help but be consumed by with those deeds mentally, in terms of the stress and the fear and the guilt that they can't avoid, even though they might push it aside, they might suppress it, they might avoid it or try to ignore it through external stimulation, often through drugs and so on. But throughout their lives they can't avoid the torture, whereas someone who is engaged in good deeds, even though they might have stress and suffering externally, because their mind is focused on wholesomeness and is caught up in the results of their good deeds and the happiness and the confidence and the peace that comes from good deeds. These are their true possessions. Even though the world around them may be falling apart, their goodness, of kindness, of charity, of ethics, their ability to say that I am a good person, that I am not an evil person, is their great power and the great support, which we say is their true possession. It's something that is your possession in this life and the possession in the next life. So these two, that we will lose all of our external possessions, and that our true internal possessions are inevitably something that follows us. These are reflections that again encourage us to practice, but they also remind us of the nature of practice and the nature of the spiritual life, that it is not about external situations or experiences. It's not even about our momentary experiences, what we see, what we hear, what we smell. The true practice is to change how we see those things, not what we see, but how we interact with it and how we perceive it. So that seeing is just seeing, not good seeing or bad seeing. Hearing is just hearing, smelling is just smelling. Trying to cultivate a clarity and a purity of mind that frees us from the attachment to things and the attachment to expectations, and frees us from the evil that comes from bad karma. These five are something that I think generally you could say should be reflected on daily, if not more often. These are the five things that the Buddha recommended, that no matter who one is, one should reflect often on these things. That I will become old, that I will become sick, that I will die, that all the things that I hold dear will eventually leave me, and I will have to part with all these things, animate or inanimate, and that I am the owner of my karma. The deeds, the good deeds, and the bad deeds that I perform will inevitably catch up with me and bring me happiness or suffering as a result. So that's the Dhamma for today.